remarkable. No frills, no pizzazz, and definitely no power. This description fit Pontiac to a T. General Motors was about to close the division down unless they could find someone to breathe new life into this old car. The man chosen for this job was Bunky Knudsen. He was Pontiac's last chance.
So when Mr. Knudsen came in mid-year 1956, he was challenged with a 5-year period. He was to turn that division around within 5 years, or they would, in fact, drop it from the corporation.
With the clock ticking on Pontiac's future, Bunky hit the ground running. He knew Pontiac was long overdue for a complete makeover. But thanks to GM's styling cycles, Knudsen couldn't change body styles for at least 2 years. He could have an immediate impact on performance, though. His goal was to squeeze 100 more horsepower out of Pontiac's new little V8 engine. Pontiac had entered the modern V8 era for the first time in 1955 with a 287 cubic inch mill, which made all of 180 horsepower. By 1957, this engine had been bored and stroked to 347 cubic inches, and horsepower had increased to 270. There was also a special 10.25 to 1 compression version, which made an amazing 315 horsepower. With this engine, the 57 Pontiacs were over 3 seconds faster, 0 to 60, than the 55 models. Pontiac's engine development program started by redesigning the cylinder heads for improved breathing. A key figure in this effort was the legendary Mac McKellar.
There was a program on to make it breathe, and that bore fruit in 1957, actually. Just about the time that Bunky Knudsen came, that program was ready, and so it really helped turn the 57 into probably one of the hottest street cars on the road at that time.
Loaded with new horsepower, Knudsen now wanted to win a few races. For help, he called on some famous names in the racing business, like Ray Nichols and Smokey Yunick. Some of these people were a bit skeptical.
He got a hold of Smokey one day and he said, Smokey, we're going to go racing. He says, we're going to get very serious about participating in some late model stock car racing. Smokey supposedly said, what are you going to race with? He says, well, a Pontiac, of course, at which point Smokey chuckled.
The chuckles didn't last long, however. When the Pontiac showed up at the 1957 Daytona Speed Weeks, they scored overwhelming victories in both the Flying Mile competition and the big Grand National stock car race. How these stock Pontiacs got so fast in such a short time was a mystery to everyone but Bunky and his engineers. For the Daytona race, they'd tooled up a special NASCAR version of the 347, sporting triple Rochester 2-barrel carburetors and a few other stock parts.
They selected a lot of outside manufacturers, aftermarket manufacturers, Edelbrock, for example, Iskandarian, for example, to build special parts for these Pontiac engines. The minute they had the proper part developed the way they wanted, they'd slap a Pontiac part number on it, and you could get it out of the parts department at any of your local Pontiac dealers.
Pontiac didn't have to rely on outside sources for long. Knudsen's engine lab was coming up to speed, and by 1958, there was a whole shelf full of high horsepower parts available to the car buyer. The block was punched out again, this time to 370 cubic inches. Tri-power carburation was a $94 option and also included special 10.5 compression cylinder heads and a high-lift camshaft to make 300 horsepower at 4,600 RPM. The next step up was a big one. For $500, you could get the new Rochester fuel injection setup, which used the same heads and camshaft and made 310 horsepower. The top-of-the-line racing goodies were called the Trophy 395A package. In addition to special heads and camshaft, the package included low-restriction exhaust manifolds and a Rochester 4-barrel carburetor. It cranked out 330 horsepower at 5,200 RPM and was bargain priced at $320. Pontiac repeated its success at Daytona in 1958, and it was becoming a pretty exciting car. But the country was in a recession, and car sales were down everywhere. The sales slump hit Pontiac and Bunky Knudsen especially hard.
1958 was the all-time low sales year for Pontiac in modern history. They sold a little over 240,000 cars as a division, which was incredible. And of course it was very bothersome to Mr. Knudsen because his 5-year period was rapidly coming to an end.
But waiting in the wings were some truly eye-catching cars, the 59s. These were the cars that would start Pontiac on the road to recovery. Stay with us as we go wide tracking. 59 was a milestone year for Pontiac styling. If you like big cars with fins, that is. Along with a nice set of tail fins, the designers gave Pontiac two styling elements that have become synonymous with Pontiac: its split grille and the wide track stance.
Contrary to what a lot of people would like to think, wide track was not an engineering development. It was not conceived to make the car a better handler or better balanced or better ride. It was purely a styling exercise.
Even with wide track styling, performance continued to be the key word in Knudsen's makeover strategy. The engine lab punched out Pontiac's power plant again in 1959, this time to 389 cubic inches. The hottest version now made 345 horsepower, an astonishing 112 horsepower gain in just 3 years. By now, the Super Duty engine program was on a huge roll. With car builders like Smokey Yunick and drivers like Fireball Roberts, Pontiac's thundered to victory at race after race. In February, stock car racing entered the big leagues. The 1959 Daytona 500 would be the first race on NASCAR's new state-of-the-art high bank track. Qualifying speeds were averaging over 135 miles per hour. But the Pontiacs were capable of running at least 10 miles an hour faster than this.
Rim riding at 145 miles an hour, Fireball Roberts has passed 34 cars in one of the most amazing rides ever seen on a racetrack.
Despite its obvious speed advantage, Pontiac didn't win the Daytona 500 this year. But 100,000 race fans saw a sight they would never forget. Pontiacs running rings around Ford, Chevy, and Chrysler. For Bunky Knudsen and his engine wizards, it was the reward they'd been waiting for.
I can remember watching that, one of the first 25-mile races on television. I guess that was the first one that was televised. And my stuff was on those engines, so that was quite a thrill, you know.
Almost 400,000 Pontiacs sold in 1959. Thanks to fresh styling, awesome power, and a full-bore marketing push, which redefined Pontiac as young America's performance car. Even though the production line Pontiacs didn't have all the Super Duty parts, the ad guys made sure you knew that those race-winning cars were powered by the same engine you could get in a new Bonneville. Sort of.
The term Super Duty, believe it or not, never got used in advertising. You would use the term like especially equipped or, you know, with special performance options and so on, but never used the term Super Duty. That was strictly a kind of an internal term.
By now, Super Duty parts were finding their way onto the streets and the drag strips. Jim Wangers thought getting Pontiac involved in drag racing was a great marketing idea.
I was able to convince the Super Duty guys that they should start to take some of these parts and make them available to the drag racers, because stock car drag racing was really coming into its own.
Wangers even got into the act himself. He helped build a factory super stock racing team at a Detroit dealership called Royal Pontiac. With Wangers driving, Royal's Hot Chief Catalina won the stock eliminator class at the 1960 U.S. Nationals. Going into 1961,